As the world gathers to mark the 80th anniversary of VE Day on Thursday, I speak to Mervyn Kersh, a remarkable veteran who not only took part in the Normandy landings, but was there for the liberation of the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp.
It's quite a conversation. We hope you enjoyed.
Mervyn Kersh, thank you very much indeed for inviting us into your home in Cockfosters, where you have lived since
1967.
1967. And we're here to talk about a very important anniversary, the 80th anniversary of VE Day. First of all, how do you feel about that anniversary? Because I know you've witnessed very many, and how do you plan to mark it?
Well, I feel very pleased that I've reached the 80th anniversary. I read somewhere that there's only about 200 British ex-servicemen from World War II who have survived. So I'm in a quickly reducing band. So I'm becoming more popular now.
Yes.
But it's nice to look back. On the other hand, because I see, it's disappointing to look back because I see so many hopes that we had then being betrayed and wrong moves politically being made to get the same again as they were in the late 30s.
What, you feel there's a tendency towards history repeating itself?
Well, I think it is repeating itself. I see our prime ministers, plural, one after the other, and of course other countries, doing exactly the same cowardice, as I call it, as Chamberlain and Baldwin and those did in the 1930s. Are
you talking about Russia and appeasing Vladimir Putin?
Appeasing any strong man. I never tire of saying, I may tire other people, but I never tire of saying a bully will never attack someone who's stronger than himself. The only way to keep peace in the world or in their own country is to be strong, to be ready for war. And then you won't be attacked. By being weak as we are now, and most countries are. A good example of that, of course, is Putin's Russia and Ukraine.
Yes.
If Ukraine had been strong, Russia wouldn't have attacked. If Austria or Czechoslovakia, or Britain for that matter, and France, had really been strong in 1938-39, Germany wouldn't have attacked its neighbours. It invites war, because you've always got bad people.
Yes. Do you see the likes of Putin and maybe Kim Jong-un and others in North Korea to be latter-day Adolf Hitlers?
Pretty well. They're certainly aggressors. They have a very strong hand in their own country, against their own people. But that you might say, is their own business. But when they step over the frontiers, that's when other countries should step up. And nobody has so far.
Can I take you back to VE Day itself? When did you learn that the war in Europe was over?
The day after I heard.
So how did you hear and what did you feel at the time, Mr. Kersh?
I was being sent back to go from Germany, to go from Belsen, as it happened. It was the last thing I was at. There's a place called Celle. I was waiting to be picked up to go to Berlin. I waited 2 weeks and nobody came. So I spent the time in Belsen, or at Belsen. Then I got a signal to come back and prepare to go to Japan.
Oh my goodness.
Which didn't appeal to me particularly, but nobody asked me, they just told me. So I was told to get on a train, given a ticket for a train, special military train. They were boarded up, all trains were boarded up, because German youngsters had been given guns and told to shoot any allies they see. They're called werewolves. So anyway, I got on this train to go from Hanover station to Bruges on the way home to the UK. It was boarded up, it was dark inside, the lights were dim. I didn't know anybody in my carriage, so I thought, well, I'll just sleep, get a good rest, which I did. When I woke up at Bruges 36 hours later, I got off and got off the train and people were dancing and music was playing, lights were on in the evening. I realised then, and of course I soon learned, that the war was over now, in Europe anyway. So I rather missed it. I joined in for about an hour or two, and then I continued my journey home.
What feelings were going through your mind at that point? You had witnessed so much, and we're going to get onto the horrors of Bergen-Belsen and what you saw while you were out in the field. But how did you feel to see people dancing and in celebratory mood, having endured many years of suffering?
It was very nice to see it, and also to realise that the war was over in Europe. The fighting was all over. As civilians in Britain, didn't have such a terrible time, except during the Blitz.
Yes.
Or perhaps Dunkirk, indirectly. But otherwise it was just shortages of everything.
Yes.
But very few people seem to mind it. Just took it in your stride, that's it. It wasn't so important. It wasn't the most important thing in the world. To have oranges or whatever, things like that we didn't see. Bananas.
Yes. Do you remember seeing a banana again?
Yes, I think I don't remember, but it was strange to see things that we hadn't seen for years. But it wasn't a hardship. In fact, after the Blitz, apart from personal losses and hardship caused by men and women for that matter, being whipped away from home, leaving his families behind, it wasn't a hardship. Not to the people at home, anyway.
Well, also, what you had witnessed out there, and you mentioned there being stationed very near Bergen-Belsen. What did you know during the war, before you encountered that concentration camp directly, about what was happening to the Jews in Europe?
Well, we knew from about 1936 what was beginning to happen. We heard those refugees had managed to escape by bribing their way out, bribing officials so they could leave Germany and came here. We heard from them what the people being rounded up for no reason other than that they were Jewish or gypsies or any other thing that the Germans didn't like. Because as it got nearer the war, we heard more. And then we got up to 1939, during early 39, we had the kinder transport.
Yes.
We had the youngsters coming. We had two staying at my house, my parents' house. And they said, so German soldiers or police came to the door, asked the parents to come to the door, and just took them off and left the children behind.
Yeah.
And they never saw the parents again. But other people organised and managed to, funds were raised here in other countries. They managed to buy tickets and guarantees. They had to have a financial guarantee here. If they're adults, they had to have a job to go to, so a lot of them became domestic servants.
Yes.
People next door did here after the war, they were. But these boys just left on their own to learn English. They could speak a bit of English, but many others who didn't speak any English. And so they were just floundering in a strange country in a strange language. It was terrible for them. At least we had two brothers. The others came single boys, knowing nobody at all.
Horrendous.
So we heard from them what was going on. And also in the Telegraph, I think that was the only paper that published it. I've got a copy of it, it's a column like that. I think it was June 1942, where they said it had been verified as to what's going on, the camps, concentration camps being set up everywhere, and people being rounded up.
So there was knowledge of what was going on?
There was knowledge. The government knew, they just didn't want to know, didn't care.
I mean, for those children escaping from Germany, thank goodness they got out of there in time, but as you say, completely separated from their families, never seeing their parents again. Presuming you, as a young Jewish boy living in London, must have been greatly affected by this. Did that influence your decision? When you signed up, you must have felt extremely motivated to take on the Germans.
I was. Although I didn't join until I was 18 and a half, when I was called up. I was looking, as a boy, I was looking forward to taking part, to doing something. I was more motivated than most of my comrades.
And do you think that was because of your being Jewish?
Oh yes, yes.
I mean, there's an interesting statistic. About 70,000 Jews, or 18% of the Jewish population, served in the UK armed forces during the war, compared with 11% of the general population.
Yes, I've seen that, yes.
But was being Jewish quite difficult? I read a story about you not being able to get kosher food, getting in a little bit of trouble when you first signed up.
Yes. Well, the food didn't worry me. I left the army, I was 7 stone, but I was fit. That was after Egypt, but I was fit then. No, I did come across anti-Semitism. As a young, go back to my childhood. As a young boy, the first school I went to, local school, till I was there till I was 9, so I know how old I was. I used to get beaten up regularly on the way home from school by my comrades. Being Jewish, all they would say was, "You killed Jesus."
Oh, goodness.
And I remember trying to point out to them, being more educated on the subject than they were, that Jesus was a Jew and that I'm not 2,000 years old.
No.
But it had no effect. All they were interested in was finding someone to beat up. And I used to come home with a bleeding nose, a black eye, or bruised, until my parents said they're not going to stand anymore. They complained to the school, and the school said, "Well, it's not on school premises, it's nothing to do with us," and they wouldn't even reprimand the boys. Though when I went to school later on, anyone who misbehaved outside school brought the school into misrepute or disrepute, and they were told off. Anyway, they wouldn't do as my parents said. They sent them to a Jewish school, which was 3 miles away. So I had to get on the tram. And in those days, you didn't have a queue. You just jumped on before it got to the stop. So it was quite agile then.
And is this back in Brixton in South London?
I lived in Brixton Hill, no.
Yes.
It's further out in Streatham.
So you're 18 and a half years old.
But sorry, just to finish that.
Sure.
I went not only changed schools, my parents sent me to the Jewish Lads Brigade, which is similar to the Boys Brigade, based on the Boys Brigade. It's sort of semi-military in all the activities. We learnt map reading and Morse code and things like that, and physical training. But we also learned boxing and wrestling, jiu-jitsu.
Really?
That was the main reason they sent me there. My father had belonged to it when he was a lad, and so did my older brother. So I had a job joining that because the age, the starting age was 11 and I was 9. So eventually they decided they'd let me join and start a new rank, midget. I was small for my age. I wouldn't have started on if I wasn't. So I became midget and I learned boxing and other things. And later, when I went to Torquay to a school there, the first thing the headmaster asked me, "What sports are you interested in?" I said, "Football and boxing, sir." So he said, "Right, I'll put you in a ring with one of our lads in a couple of days," which he did. And I had 3 rounds in the ring with him, and I beat him on points. I didn't knock him out, on points. Then they told me that he was the schoolboy champion of Devon and Cornwall.
Oh!
So I became the schoolboy champion. And wherever I went in the army and at other schools as well, I told that story, and nobody ever laid a finger on me in the army. You know, they had arguments and fights and
Sure.
verbal fights and so on, but nobody ever tried hitting me. And that was a lesson I learned.
It was a valuable
If
lesson.
you can fight, they know you can fight back, whether it's as a country or an individual. A bully will not touch you.
Yes. And did you end up in Torquay because that's when you had been evacuated out of London?
I was evacuated. Well, the first time I went was a junior school because my uncle was a teacher. I didn't go to my own school, so I lost a couple of years wasted there. 18 months. Then my mother came back just in time for the Blitz, and after a time my mother had a hysterectomy, and the hospital said she'd got to get out of London. So we went to Exeter, and then from Exeter we went to Torquay. By that time I was 13, I think.
And then it's only 5.5 years later that a young 18-and-a-half-year-old Mervyn Kersh signs up. I mean, when you're signing up and you're going to war, obviously the war was well into its third, fourth year by then. Do you know what you're signing up for? Or do you go into it sort of with a sense of adventure?
Really a sense of adventure, a sense of purpose, but a sense of adventure. I know my big brother was in it from the day war began. He volunteered for the Air Force.
Yes.
But I envied him. I liked I liked the Air Force uniform. I tried to get in the Air Force, but they didn't want me in the Air Force. The Army wants you, is what they said, and that was it. But, so I had a sense of purpose, but it was probably schoolboyish, you know, not the gritty, nitty-gritty of what war meant.
Mm. And how conscious were you at that point that you would end up taking part in the Normandy landings?
Fairly soon, because after about 3 months, I was then sent to a unit which was forming for what we called the second, we didn't know it was Normandy, we called it the second front. We were getting ready for that, a depot that was getting ready prepared for that, training and organising. And from then onwards we were till we ended up in the south of England, waiting for the second front.
And what feelings are going through your mind at that point? Is it adrenaline fueled? Are you worried? Do you even know what you're letting yourself in for at that point?
Not entirely, no. Partly because I had followed the Spanish Civil War, so-called Civil War, where Germany was machine gunning and bombing streets in Guernica, for instance, in Spain. Mm. So we saw those pictures and films, and of course other parts of the world. We knew part of it what it was, but you don't worry about it at that age.
No.
It doesn't worry you. No, I was quite looking forward to it.
And can you remember and talk us through how that played out? So getting onto the landing craft, just talk us through the journey from the south coast of England to, I think it was Gold Beach where you landed.
Yeah, I landed on Gold Beach. I landed by myself. I wasn't with my unit. That was unfortunate because the first batch that went over on D-Day or day after D-Day, they were mostly officers and COs who were reconnaissance unit to find a suitable depot, place for a depot for 1,000 vehicles, which we were going to look after and disperse all the time and maintain 1,000 vehicles. But they didn't get across. They were the only ship that was torpedoed on the way over. They were all killed except the boss, Colonel Gore. And he was thrown in the sea. He came back and asked for volunteers to take their place, and nobody moved. So I felt it was my duty, and someone's got to do it, and I did, set an example.
Wow.
I don't like to say that now, but that's what it was. And after I stepped forward, there was another pause, and then gradually the others came. But I went on my own for my section of the vehicle company. Others went for other parts of stores and suppliers. So I didn't know anyone else. They just put me and said, get on that, the next boat's going. And I just climbed up into the dark or went down on a rope ladder. And I down to the ship. We were told to get some sleep. May not get any for a long time afterwards.
Yeah.
So I went to sleep, curled up on a coil of rope, and till a sailor woke us up. Didn't see anything or hear anything, it was dark. And the sailor woke me up and said, better get up now, get something to eat. We'll be there in an hour or two. And then as dusk came, dawn came, it got a bit lighter. I could see all these vehicles close to the table and chairs. I didn't realise the sea was full of them. You know, little boats and big boats.
Yes.
And in the distance, as we got nearer, I could see the cliffs of France. And then they told us it was Normandy. We knew in advance which part of the coast we would be, where we would be relative to other units. They had sections, with Gold Beach, for instance, Gold, Juno, and the others. And each Gold was split up into 3. Jig, Peach, they had various sectors of it. So we knew who was going to be on the right and who was the left. But I, having gone with a strange ship, I had no idea where I was, which was peculiar. I felt rather isolated. But when I saw the outline of France, that was the first time I really felt afraid. Because I heard these huge, you could almost see them, huge shells whooshing overhead from Germany, from the Germans on the coast to the big battleships, and the big battleships firing similar ones back. They were just going over our heads. Nobody fired at me, which is quite useful.
It's one way of putting it, Mr. Kersh.
You might have been out of a job.
You're saying you only then felt afraid. I mean, you had been following in the footsteps of a ship that had been shot down. Nobody else wanted to volunteer, presumably fearing imminent death.
Well, it was a bit shocking to be told those ahead of you had all been killed. Would you like to follow in? It wasn't a very welcoming invitation.
No.
But the chances are that you'd survive anyway.
Did that have to be the mentality? I'll do
You're
my best.
You're going, that's it. So we should have gone on. I think the rest of the unit went on D+4. They left on D+4. They got there a day or 2 days later.
And when did you leave? D+?
D+3 I left.
And then can you tell us what it was like to be ordered off the boat, presumably into water and presumably into direct enemy fire?
Again, I had a bit of luck because the people who were organising from the boat said get on a vehicle, a tracked vehicle, a personnel carrier, which is like a small tank, carry personnel rather than fight. So I got on that with a strange driver, and we just went off the boat into the sea. It had been waterproof, so no water came in, didn't get my toes wet. Because to get off and land in the water and get your clothes, your trousers wet, it drags your feet, particularly if you're overloaded. Anyway, so I landed on the shore, dry. So I was lucky again there. I saw the vehicles that had been destroyed on the beach. They were still there, burnt out or smashed up. The beach master was yelling out, keep going, others behind you. So I realised we've got to clear the beach, make room for some, next load coming in. And he said, go up the slope on the cliffs in front of us. There was a track going up. I think they'd been used by fishermen in the past to get from the village down to the sea. And we went up there, got to the top of the store. I remember seeing a few shops, wine shop I remember, and houses, and a crowd of people, mostly women, children, and a few old men, waving bottles and glasses of wine, offering us wine and throwing flowers at us, or to us, sorry.
Yes. Delighted to see you.
They were obviously delighted. That itself was a good feeling. There was something worthwhile. But we weren't allowed to stop. Since we stopped, I told the driver to stop a minute, but the police, military police, immediately said, "Keep going, the others behind you."
Yeah.
So we went on. And then I just drove about the countryside, as I recall, until I found a nice driveway with a big chateau at the end, which had enough grounds. It had enough rooms in it, presumably, I just assumed, for 200 officers and drivers, which I had to find, and 1,000 vehicles to park. So I put there's a notice on it, HQ 21 Panzer Division. It was a notice near the gate. So I covered that with a paper I found and put HQ 17 AOD, RAOC. And then I went in, but they couldn't go in the building because they went down the drive. The Royal Engineers were already there and they were clearing out booby traps.
Wow.
It was covered in booby traps. And for example, on the piano, the engineers told me, if you open the piano lid, the keyboard lid, it exploded. Only a small explosion. A book was carved out inside. You open the cover and it exploded. The toilet seat, if you lifted it up, it exploded. The Germans had put all these booby traps everywhere, and pretty well anything. Mundane things. They weren't big enough to kill you, but they're big enough to blow a finger off or damage your hand.
Yeah.
So you had to get out of the war, in fact, out of the battle.
So the Germans are in retreat at this point, although when you land on the beaches, are you encountering enemy fire? When's the first point that you encounter a Nazi when you land? Nobody shot at you?
Not yet.
When did that start happening?
It didn't. Nobody actually fired at me throughout the war.
How did that happen?
Very lucky war.
Yes.
Nobody fired at me. I heard plenty of firing, but nobody fired at me. I wasn't in the front line anyway. I was always usually 3 miles or more behind the lines. But I lost my memory after. I didn't realise it till later. I came out of that chateau. I waited till the engineers had finished. They took about 3 hours. And then I took over. I picked up some maps, German maps. One was a swastika, which the only thing I ever kept was souvenirs from Germany, from the war. I've still got them. One's got the German eagle holding a swastika stamped on it. So I've got those as souvenirs. I just about got that, and an officer, infantry colonel, drove up the driveway and asked me what I'm doing there. So I told him we'd requisitioned it in the name of Colonel Gore for blah, blah, blah. So he said, where is Colonel Gore? I said, he's not here yet, sir. He'll be here any minute. I have no idea when he was going to come. In fact, today I can't even remember how I'm supposed to tell him where I was, what I'd found, what the communication was. We didn't have radios or telephones or anything. I really can't remember how I was supposed to do it. Anyway, so he said, is Colonel Gore here now? I said, no, sir. So he said, well, I'm a colonel, you're a private, git. I tried to remonstrate with him and he just repeated, I'm a colonel, you're a... He dug me in the tummy and said, you're a private, get out. So I couldn't argue anymore. So that was all waste of time.
And as well as having some mementos, you also had a book of Psalms with you.
Had what?
A book of Psalms with you.
Oh, on the crossing. That's when I began to get a bit, see these things going over and hear them. But, to realise what war means. It's not just a comic book version of a war. I did get a bit afraid, as a couple of others did at that stage, when they faced reality. I did have a book of Psalms. We all had books of Psalms, of different books, I suppose, from the various religious. It was part of the army issue. I kept mine in my breast pocket because I'd read somewhere that in 1914-18 they had stopped a bullet for somebody, so I kept mine inside his pocket there. So I got it out and read a couple of Psalms and put it back again. I felt better. It worked anyway. I'm here now.
I mean, you've described yourself, Mr. Kersh, of having a lucky war, but you end up being posted very near to Bergen-Belsen. And the scenes that later unfold there at that concentration camp after it's liberated by the Allies in 1945 lives with you forever. Can you tell me a bit about what you encountered there?
Well, I wasn't allowed. I had I didn't know I had 2 weeks. I went there every day. but I wasn't allowed to go in. It was in the hands by that time. It was about 4 or 5 days, I think it was, after its liberation by British troops. I wasn't allowed in because of typhus and dysentery and other diseases, so I had to stand outside the gates, and people came out. They were coming out all the time in their outfits, their striped things. The only ones who could come out, of course, were those who were fit enough to come out. And they intended to get to Hanover Station, which was a German railway hub, hoping to get people coming from all directions, find out news of their families, their homes, their jobs and everything about them. But I managed to talk to those, obviously, those who could speak English, or a bit of French as I did. I couldn't speak to any of the other languages. And they had one intention only. They didn't want to talk about the past, didn't want to tell me or try to tell me what it'd been like. They just wanted to talk about the future, what they intended to do with what's left of their lives. But most of them, if they had any news at all, from other people who came into Bergen-Belsen, because the last weeks of the war, a lot of marched from the east. Germans had marched from to Belsen, so it was overcrowded, even at their standards. But they didn't want to talk about the past, they wanted to talk about the future. The future is they wanted to get to what was called Palestine, to set up the Jewish state there again, where they wouldn't have to be dependent on the goodwill of other people, as we have for the last 2,000 years.
What was the condition of some of the prisoners?
Well, as I say, those who were able to walk weren't too bad. They were skinny, very, very skinny, and obviously looked weak. Their faces were skeletal. No, one or two looked fit, but there was just the lack of the bone structure, I suppose. But the way they walked, they were more or less shuffling as they walked. I had about the army issue to the British soldiers was weekly 1 bar of chocolate and 40 cigarettes in a tin, oval tin. I didn't smoke, so I changed mine for another chocolate. So it just so happened I had a bar of chocolate on me, but the first time I went, the first day I was there. So I got that out and offered it to the fellow I was talking to. And his face lit up with such joy and amazement that he hadn't seen it for years. But after that I collected from the other people, I didn't know them, I was in a holding unit, not my own unit, in Southern. So they're all strangers. So I went around collecting chocolate. I took it with me and distributed it to the people outside. And the face of every one of them was the same. In amazement, that's amazement to see chocolate. I learned years later that the chocolate was the worst thing you could have given them, someone in their physical state. But I didn't know that at the time. I don't know how many I killed.
Well, you did it out of the kindness of your heart. Yeah. And the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, wrote to you very recently and said it must have been particularly horrifying seeing what you witnessed outside Bergen-Belsen. As a Jewish man, the Prime Minister wrote to discover such depravity towards your fellow Jews.
Well, I didn't discover such depravity. I knew there was depravity. The whole idea of National Socialism was depravity. I knew that. I didn't know the extent of it. It surprised me the amount I saw of it. The scale of it was the only thing new to me, not what has happened in the camp, but the number of people involved. There were 40,000 or something there. There were 40,000 dead bodies there. I didn't know that at the time, but I knew there were loads of bodies piled up there. I was told that.
Yeah.
But,
and when did it later emerge that you'd sort of had this front row in one of the most heinous periods of history in the 20th century? Because it later, of course, emerges that the Nazis have been responsible for the death of 6 million Jews and countless million more others.
Yes.
When did you discover that, Mr. Kersh?
What, the scale of it?
Yes.
I suppose shortly after what happened, the local Germans in the villages round about said, oh, they didn't know anything was going on. You don't get that number of people coming off trains and trucks and disappearing into the woods, into the countryside around you, and never coming out, and not to wonder what happened and where they've gone. So everybody, for a moment, they didn't know. Eisenhower, when he took over the whole area, rounded up, or had his troops, rounded up all the local peoples and took them along into the camp and made them strip the bodies and so on. So they couldn't say they didn't know, Germans. It was a scale far larger than they ever expected. You know, before it was tens of thousands, but didn't know it was tens of millions. And when people say that it's exaggerated or it's lies, the best proof is the Germans were so meticulous keeping records. Every person who came in there, except for the last couple of months when, because of the war, it was chaotic, but throughout, in every camp, they registered the name of the person, the age of the person, and the date. So they had, and the number that they gave them. So they provided all the evidence themselves, the German authorities. So it wasn't a matter of making up a story or exaggerating it. You have to believe if the Germans kept the records, and that's what they showed. And they showed, I think it was almost 6 million Jews, plus thousands of others. But they didn't start off with the Jews, they started off with the communists, Hitler, National Socialists. They started off with the communists, nobody protested. They then went to the socialists and rounded up the Socialist Party opposition. Nobody protested. Remember these words? Pastor Niemöller, after the war, German pastor, Christian pastor, said then, and finally they came for me, and there's nobody left to stand up for me. And that's what it was, divide and rule.
In a way, I mean, there's a double miracle here in a sense that you're a Jew in Europe and you survive the Second World War, but also you're a soldier who lands at Normandy and you end up surviving the Second World War. You witness such horrors. What effect does that have on your life? I mean, at times did you suffer from any survivor's guilt?
Guilt? No. I never felt guilty for surviving.
No. Grateful.
I felt thankful. No, I was just under protection, if you like. Godly protection. I don't know why. Millions were called out, millions came out. The numbers who were killed was terrible enough, but it was a small proportion. It's just bad luck. Really, just unfortunate in their case.
So you were one of the lucky ones, literally.
I was one of the lucky ones.
And when the war was
And
over...
so was my brother.
Yes. He came out alive.
He came out unharmed, yeah.
And then what was it like adjusting to post-war civilian life? You went into the fake fur trade, I understand?
Later,
Yes.
after trying a couple of years to get a job,
Did it take ages?
well, the job I had in the army was based on the methods of control, of stock control, that Littlewood's mail order firm has done, had usually used, thousands of items, and we were trained to use that system. So my first attempt was to write to Littlewoods in Liverpool and ask them if they could give me a job. They did answer, which was a rarity. Most firms I wrote to didn't answer. They just said I was too old.
How old were you?
Well, I was just 22.
What?
That month I was 22. I was too old, but I was already trained, so it wouldn't need much training to switch over to their items. The same system. It was all done by hand in those days.
So did you then endeavour to set up your own business?
And I tried other, well, again later, I tried other mail order firms. Most of them didn't bother to answer. But the others that did, 2 or 3 that did, also said they want boys of 18 to train. Even though in my application I said I've been using the same system, so I'm familiar with it. It took about 6 months to train me. So.
But also you'd been at war. It seems like a rather...
They weren't concerned about that.
No.
They weren't concerned with even absorbing someone they didn't need. I think they might have tried it.
But you went into the fake fur trade?
Eventually. I tried all sorts of things.
Yes.
Door-to-door selling, but I didn't have a vehicle, so if I sold my sample, I didn't have anything left to sell or show. All sorts of things I did. Eventually I saw this bit of cloth, had it made into coats, and showed it to Harrods first, to Wallace, a consumer chain. And they liked it so much. I had worked there for a while as a trainee shop manager, fashion shop manager. And they were afraid I was going to try and compete with them afterwards, so we fell out over that. Anyway, I showed them these coats and they liked them so much, they ordered immediately, more than I expected. So I thought, well, I'll try Harrods. I took the Harrods and Harrods loved them and placed a larger order. From then on it was just, I didn't have to sell. I tried to sell cloth coats before and not been any good at it. But here they were selling them themselves. I was referred to by the buyers as friend. My friend's here again. They dropped what they were talking to the assistants or whatever they were doing, they dropped when I came in. And I remember one buyer from Peter Robinson, about 100 yards away. She insisted on coming up. We were on the 3rd floor. Well, I was on the 3rd floor then. No lift. And she insisted on coming. She was very fat. She waddled along. I thought she's never going to get up the stairs, but she kept coming up. She was only anxious to make sure that she got her coats.
Really?
They were so in demand. And then someone from the United States came over and placed a huge order. And then we got a telegram from the Soviet Union, come along and bring samples. But without any clues to what they were interested in. By that time they had different cloths. Different cloths. No idea of their sizes either. They were sort of a fat Russian mammoth, I don't know what you call them. They thought they were a passive people.
Yes.
But in the event, they were no different from walking around London.
No.
If they didn't speak, you wouldn't know they weren't British.
So as well as making a success in the rag trade, so to speak, you marry, you've now got 3 children, 3 grandchildren,
Yes.
3 great-grandchildren.
Yeah.
And you always insisted, Mr. Kersh, that you would go into schools and talk about the Second World War. And
I have been for quite a few years.
Why
now.
is that so important to you?
To warn people of an upcoming generation not to follow in the footsteps of their parents or grandparents. And I use the same phrase again and again till I get tired of hearing it. A bully will not attack anyone who's he thinks is stronger than himself. The answer is be strong. Be armed, be ready. I even write about it.
And you talked at the beginning of the interview about suffering from anti-Semitism when you were a boy, and now we are seeing this resurgence of anti-Semitism.
Yes.
Incidents in America up 200%, incidents in this country up. They've doubled according to the Community Security Trust's latest figures. A lot of this has been fueled by the October the 7th attacks by Hamas in Israel. Do you worry as much now as you did then about anti-Semitism?
I don't know about as much, but I certainly do worry about its development and the fact that the marchers who claim to be pro-Palestinian, whatever that may mean, or pro-Hamas, again, they don't know what it means. But to me, it's just anti-Semitism. They're anti-Jewish, and using that as an excuse. And they're going every week, and they're allowed to go every week. This is the thing. I think that is wrong. The authorities should not allow it. They made their protest. They're entitled to make a point of view. They've made their point of view. What the protest is, I don't know. That Israel hit back, protected itself. There's no doubt. they don't question whether they themselves started the fighting.
Yes.
But so they're not the aggressor. Israel's not the aggressor. But whatever the motive, they're entitled to. The crowds are entitled to their opinion, but not to wage war, particularly through Jewish areas.
Yes.
Where there's a lot of Jewish people, intimidating. And the authorities, it worries me the authorities haven't put a stop to it. They talk about it, but they haven't done it yet, even now. And that could develop. I'm old enough not to have to worry about it personally.
Mm.
But I wonder what will happen in 10, 15 years' time here.
And when you go into schools, are you also concerned that young people don't really understand what happened during the Second World War, perhaps don't understand the Holocaust? We spoke earlier about, the fact that there are dwindling numbers of veterans left. We don't want to get into a situation where children don't learn about what happened.
Yeah, they should do, they must do. It's very important that they learn. Otherwise it just becomes a historical fact if they just know the basic facts and no details of. If they can't visualise what it could be like. It could go over their heads. I mean, it's like us reading the Crusades, for instance. It's something in the past. We don't think about it. Or the Black Plague, which is not a human thing. It just happens. 1,000 people got killed in the Black Plague. They died. And you get on with your cup of tea, whatever it is. They've got to be taught what it means and how it was arrived at, the situation. But that lesson over and over again, always be prepared for war, and you won't have it. And that's what I write. I give out poems I've written on that. And I have been talking to schools. I haven't been asked the last year. I think the Barnet Borough Council particularly think I'm not here anymore.
Well, you're still here. There's no doubt about that. How are you feeling at 100 now, Mr. Kersh? I mean, is that...
I feel older than I did at 99. No, I think the last few months, I think I've got downhill a bit.
Have you? You seem very perky to me.
This shaking, I'm sorry,
No.
it's upset you. This is Parkinson's. It's not me. I can't stop it. I can press down. It's still shaking. I take pills. Pills.
Mm.
But it affects everything.
Yes. Just to conclude, Mr. Kersh, I mean, looking back on your life, and you're wearing your medals here today, you've got very many different pins because you have travelled, you've gone back to the memorial sites, you went back to Normandy. How would you like to be remembered? Because some people call you a war hero. Do you recognise that term?
I do. I refuse it. I'm not a hero. That's one of my poems. I'm not a hero. Not a hero. There were millions of us called up, or some volunteered. I didn't volunteer because I went back to college, to school after evacuation, after wasting 2 years, to try and catch up, take the matriculation. And exactly a week after I took it, somehow or other I got called up. But not a hero. We just did what was needed, and everyone did, even those who were not the military, housewives, older people. They got on with what had to be done. No one thought much about it. And I know there were people we called spivs who just took advantage of everything and so on, but they were very, very few. You just got on with them. There's a job that had to be done. I think everyone realised that. And that was it. And the fact that when we found it had been done, I didn't fancy the idea of going on to Japan, though, mind you. I didn't have much interest in that, no personal interest.
No.
But I was in the army, that was it. I thought to come back to the UK to go to Japan. I didn't tell my parents when I got home. They thought I was home for good. I said, no, only for a few weeks, then I'm off to Japan. But luckily the Japanese heard I was coming and they surrendered.
Another lucky moment,
Another
perhaps.
lucky moment. And then they shut me off to Egypt. That was quite interesting. Nice and warm.
Bit of a change.
I got nice and brown. Stripped to the waist myself. The wool was over, no wool. Just working in the desert. No, that was quite nice.
Well,
some good friends out there.
You may not see yourself as a war hero, but you will be a hero to many listening and watching this podcast. Thank you so much for...
Because there's nobody left.
Not necessarily because there's nobody left, but I think it's important to hear you tell this first-hand story, to give your testimony so that others can listen back to this and understand what happened from somebody who was actually there. So I'm so grateful for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.